Hello, everyone. Um, Bear with me. I am a little tired. Just finished up my work week, breaking me in at a new job right now, so it's been going pretty well. Um, but if I slur a little bit or sound really tired or zone out and lose my train of thought, that would be why. But I have uh, a factory job right now, basically very monotonous, but it leaves me a lot of time to think. I guess that could be a good or a bad thing, depending. But I've just had ideas for things that I want to discuss or dig into all week long. And now I have a nice little 3 day weekend here, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I want to talk today about this question. Is the rapture really the next thing on God's spiritual calendar of events? So, just to give you a little background, I have always my parents were both first generation Christians. My mom was raised in the Catholic Church, and due to a Bible study, my grandmother and my mom and her sisters all began to realize that the teachings of the Catholic Church didn't line up with the Bible, and they were converted, became Bible believing, born again Christians. And my dad didn't really get saved until college. He was raised in a religious, church-going family, but I think my dad had just never accepted Christ as Savior until then. He had a friend, I guess, who gave him some apologetics material, um, evidence that demands a verdict, I believe, by Josh McDowell, and he read that and carefully considered the evidence presented therein. If you really dig into things, all the evidence points to the existence of a creator God and to the Bible being his word. And anyway, both my parents, being first generation Christians, wanted to raise us kids in the nurture and admonition of the Lord and in a good Christian home. And so we grew up going to church regularly. We went to typically fairly small Bible believing independent churches that did not answer to a higher church hierarchy. My parents were both adamant, due to their backgrounds, that you had to be rooted in God's Word, which is the source. It is, well, it's a living book. It's really an offshoot or part of God Himself. It's revelation that has been given to us, and that's more important than any teaching of man. So the churches we went to were generally Baptist churches or Bible churches, very small, independent, not answerable to a higher church authority. And we kids were taught to search the scriptures and to reason from them for ourselves and to double check things against the scriptures. But that being said, any denomination, um, even if they're fundamentalist and rooted in the word, there is sort of these doctrinal package deals that they tend to fall into. And so there were a lot of things that I just never really thought to question, that I was taught in church. And really, in the last well, since about 2016, I guess, I've just been, well, God's shown me a lot of things, the flat earth for one. And I've been led, I guess, to question some of those preconceptions that I never challenged before, doctrinally speaking, things that I believe just because I was taught to believe them. And, well, come to some interesting conclusions due to those investigations. But generally speaking, in you know fundamentalist Baptist churches, you're going to hear that the rapture is the next thing on the spiritual calendar of events, and that there's nothing else that needs to happen before the rapture takes place. And so there is generally it's taught that that is impending, and it could happen at any moment. It could be tonight. Uh, and Some have even gone so far as to put actual dates on it. That is unwise and anti-biblical to do that. I don't think that that is something that Christians should do. Um, and there is actually scripture to back that up. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but those of you who come from a Bible believing Christian background, I'm sure, are familiar with some of those biblical principles. But I want to point out something about prophecy because I've been starting to get into it, and I've really learned a lot in the last couple years, and I've found some interesting things. One thing that's very interesting is you can't just, especially in the arena of Bible prophecy, the best commentary on the scriptures are the scriptures themselves. So you have to look at any teaching in the greater biblical context. Um, and so I did this, for example, with the Mystery Babylon prophecies. And I realized that there was at least four books of the Bible, not just Revelation, but Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Daniel, that talk about this Mystery Babylon end times entity, for example. And when you take all those details together from all the books of the Bible that talk about that entity, you get kind of a different picture than what I had been taught growing up, that it was, the Roman Catholic Church. That's kind of the traditional um, interpretation of Mystery Babylon, because for the last 2,000 years, the Catholic Church has been one of the main persecutors of Bible believing Christians. And then, of course, the early Christians grew up under Rome as well. Um, anyway, that's a rabbit trail that I don't really want to get on right now. But one thing that we see when it comes to Bible prophecy is that the Bible, you're never going to find in just one place a perfect layout, beginning to end, of all the events in Scripture. If you really want to get that chronology, the Bible tends to put pairs of events together. Like such and such will have to happen after such and such will happen before such and such. And if you pick through the scriptures and find those pairs of events, you can put together a general chronology of certain things. Specifically, I'm speaking about the end times here. And there are prerequisites. And if you're just looking at, one book of the Bible only and you're not studying out the others as well, and looking at the broader context, you're going to miss some of that stuff. And so there are actually prerequisites to the rapture. Now, let me say that the fictional series Left Behind, um, and this is actually incredibly interesting to me. Let me ask you a question. When was an entire franchise ever um, created in the past? And I do mean a mainstream franchise that's coming out of Hollywood, because I mean we had some big name actors in these Left Behind movies. Um, when was the last time that happened in a movie series related to Bible doctrine? Left Behind's really the only example that I can think of. Now maybe I'm wrong about that, and there's just stuff that I'm not familiar with. But I mean, Nicolas Cage was in one of the Left Behind movies. Think about that a little bit. Pretty weird, right? And that was, the view that I mentioned before, the pre-tribulation rapture, where the next thing on God's calendar of events is the rapture, and it could happen any moment, and it's just going to take us all by surprise. And I would like to say thank you to someone posted some comments on one of my videos somewhere. Um, I believe, I don't remember his name, so I'm not going to say that. I probably should have looked that up before getting into this. But I had talked about the tribulation and the rapture a little bit, and he had kind of put a bug in my ear and sent me some resources, some good preaching, and some other stuff. Kind of a different view of the rapture and tribulation timeline than I was familiar with, and I did dig into that stuff. And I've changed my position on that. I do not hold to a pre-tribulation rapture any longer. I don't think that the rapture is the next thing on the calendar of events. Now, it's a very convenient doctrine, and it is a very comfortable doctrine, because in America we don't like to suffer, we don't like to sacrifice, and we don't like the idea that we could go through any kind of hardship. And as a nation, we really have had it pretty good for a long time, being the apex nation of the world for as long as we have been now. Interestingly enough, this is the attitude of those living in Mystery Babylon. I will always be a queen of nations. I will never know loss of children. Um, there's an arrogance due to her position of power over the other nations of the world, but she's cast down and judged. She does not remain queen of nations, and she does come to know great loss of her children. But anyway, in the scriptures, we don't really see that God, it's not a priority for God, let me put it this way, to spare his children from suffering. Understand that Christ is our example, and Christ was sent by God the Father to die, self sacrifice, taking upon himself the sins of the world, so that we could be freed from that and have a relationship with God the Father through Jesus Christ the Son. And Christ is our example. Christian means little Christ. We are to be living up to that example. And part of that example is suffering. Christ was very clear with his disciples, if the world hated me, they're going to hate you if you're following me. That's the way it goes. In the world, you will have tribulation. Those who believe that the rapture is the next thing on the calendar of events, and that it's just going to take Christians out before things get bad, they tend to justify it with this idea that God will never subject his obedient children to the wrath of God. And I do believe that that is a true teaching. But understand we live in a fallen world. There is a lead up to the end times that's going to be pretty ugly. Remember that the Antichrist comes on the scene during a time of world war. There's a period of world war, and it's so devastating and destructive that pretty much everyone is willing to give in when this Antichrist figure comes on the scene offering the peace solution. Christians in the United States have been generally spared from serious persecution and from hardship and things like that. But around the world, that's not the case. The last 100 years have been pretty bloody for Christians in many places. There's places in the world where Christians are hunted down and killed just for being Christians. I was just reading, I don't remember where it was actually, but there was a series of Christmas Day massacres of Christians by Arabs. I want to say it was in some villages in Africa, if I remember correctly. But there's other places like Sinai Peninsula where there's Christian villages, there's Muslim villages. And every once in a while, the Muslims, just go out and kill a bunch of Christians. You have countries like communist China. You have nations like Japan during World War II that persecuted Christians. Actually, one of the cities we bombed was the largest Christian city in Japan at the time. I do mean atomic bomb. Nagasaki, Hiroshima. I forget which one of those two cities it was, but it was the city in Japan that had the largest Christian population. And the Christians there, now many of them were Catholic to my knowledge, so maybe not necessarily Bible believing born again Christians. Many of them had faced some persecution at the hands of the Japanese prior to the U.S. nuking them. But my point is that Christian persecution is a real thing. Just because we haven't experienced that in the U.S. doesn't mean that God somehow is invested in sparing us from suffering. The Bible is very clear that God chastens, so there is punishment if we go astray. There will be suffering due to that to turn us back to the right path. But then there's also a refining process where God allows suffering that may seem meaningless to us for the purpose of developing our character and for a greater good that we're not aware of. The book of Job talks about that. Understand, Job was a righteous man. God killed all his, well, no, God didn't kill all his children, but he took his hand of protection off of Job's family and allowed Satan to destroy all of Job's children and take all of his wealth, and then eventually Job's health as well. And it was um, Job didn't understand that, and Job really never got an explanation of that during his lifetime. Most of the disciples died violently; they were martyred, many of them. Um, so understand that Christians living in peace and prosperity and in an environment of religious freedom, free from persecution, like we have in the United States for these last several hundred years, that is a rare, rare thing in the course of history. In the course of history, where totalitarian powers have typically tried to dominate and subjugate their people and control things even down to the level of what people were allowed to think, speak, and believe. Now, in another video that I just recently did about the horsemen of the apocalypse, so called, um, I do believe that we are in the era of the horsemen right now. So, horsemen are the advance guard or the scouts for an army. So, we're in the lead up, and we don't know how long the lead up is going to be. But those horsemen were disease and bioweapons, man made bioweapons, war, and famine. And all of those, by the way, are human initiated and caused. And then the fourth horseman was just mass death as a result of the previous three. And so I don't know how long this lead up period is. It could be decades, but it's going to be pretty ugly. I do believe by the time we get to the tribulation proper, the United States will not be a world power any longer. In fact, we might not last the next 2 years. If you've been really paying attention to what's been going on behind the scenes in America, um, you do understand that millions of young military age men have been allowed to just walk into this country. That there's a caravan moving up through Central America right now, 4 million people. That's set to get here January, February, somewhere in that time frame. We literally have video footage of people coming across with rifles. And like I said, these by and large, these are not immigrants bringing families. They are young men of military age. Our leaders are permitting this to happen because we're about to see a major power shift in the United States. In a book I wrote and in some of the videos on my channel, I have been very clear that we're heading for civil war, and then our enemies are certainly not going to sit on the sidelines of that. When they see the chaos, they will use that as an opportunity to strike. This end times entity, Mystery Babylon, it's a powerful consumerist nation, very imperialistic, rules over the kings of the earth. It's used as a weapon of war by God to destroy other nations. But Mystery Babylon becomes arrogant. There's a civil war within the land. And then that civil war, when it actually becomes violent, ruler against ruler, a coalition of Eastern powers rises up and destroys this entity, Mystery Babylon, in just one day. And I'll let you kind of work out the details of the interpretation there. If people are interested, feel free to send me an email or post comments, and I might do more on that particular subject. I probably will anyway as we go forward, as I have time and opportunity, Lord willing. Um, but my point is, God often intentionally allows terrible, terrible suffering and loss and destruction, death, torture, and all manner of other evils into the lives of his children for purposes of his glory that ultimately we aren't necessarily aware of during our lifetimes here on earth. So this whole idea that the rapture is next because its purpose will be to spare Christians from suffering is a bit ludicrous to me, because sparing Christians from suffering has never really been a high priority for God. Our spiritual development and our impact on others, these things are high priorities for God. And sometimes terrible suffering furthers those causes. But I want to talk about some scripture today from Second Thessalonians chapter 2. Let's just dig into this a little bit because this is one example of those paired events where we see that there's an event, it will happen, absolutely, but it's paired with another event saying that this other event's going to happen first. And specifically, we're talking about the revelation of the Antichrist, where he is revealed. That does need to precede the rapture. So let's read this and we'll poke around a little bit, and then we'll go to Daniel and just give a little more context on this from the Old Testament. I'm just going to read this and I'll explain as we go through. And I'm going to just put this out there. I've been studying off and on Bible prophecy for the last several years. I am really just kind of, I would say maybe an intermediate student. I am by no means an expert on this stuff. And I am always open to learning more. And if, as I'm given time and space, I hope to continue learning more and then to share the things that I learn. Um, so, take what I'm putting out there, take the wheat and leave the chaff. And feel free to leave comments or to contact me, as I mentioned. I believe you can find my email under the About section on my YouTube channel here. I think there's a little thing that you can click for uh, inquiries or something, and it'll show you my email if you want to get in touch with me that way. And I'm completely open to that. I'm a writer, so I do enjoy conversing by email. Writing back and forth to someone is a lot easier than conversing face to face. You have a little bit of time to compose what you're putting together, and I do like having good conversations that way. Anyway, let's read this. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and by our gathering together unto him. So the word rapture doesn't appear in the scriptures, but that's what's being described here, the catching away of the saints. That ye be not soon shaken in mind or troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. So they're saying, don't interpret anything that we've written or said as the day of Christ being right around the corner. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Now I do think that we live in a time of a great falling away. You just don't. People my age, especially, I'm 36, and younger people, they are just absolutely godless. And the world system is teaching our young women to behave like prostitutes and be proud of it. And our young men are just so addled in every way. And every addiction that you can possibly imagine is being intentionally cultivated by the establishment because it weakens society, it destroys the family, it makes people easy to control like drugged animals. I do think that falling away has already happened. But there's another part to that, and that is that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God. Who opposeth all that's called God? Okay, Antichrist. Exalteth himself above. So Antichrist can mean a couple different things. It can mean someone who is against or opposed to God, to Christ, or it can mean someone who sits in the place of Christ. And so some people have said the Antichrist is going to be the Pope because the Catholic Church does actually claim that the Pope is Christ's vicar or substitute on earth. So he's literally in the place of Christ. And I would certainly agree that the Pope is an Antichrist figure. The Catholic Church is an earthly kingdom that came about when Christianity was mingled with Roman paganism. Basically, it is not true faith in Jesus Christ. It's not the it's not a true religion. Anyway, let's carry on. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So this is describing an event called the abomination of desolation, where there's going to be a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, and this world leader, the the son of perdition here, the man of sin. This is the Antichrist, the person of Antichrist. Because understand, there's already an Antichrist spirit in the world and has been since the scriptures were written 2,000 years ago. Um, but this is actually a person who is the Antichrist. And the Bible, you put the pieces together, as I mentioned, from different prophets and so forth and books of the Bible. You do see quite clearly that the Antichrist, now he has different names, the man of sin, the son of perdition. This is a singular and a real, actual person. And here we have an actual event that this actual person is actually going to do. He is sitting in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God and exalting himself. Let's keep reading. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things, and now you know that what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. In other words, now you know what the precursor or the prerequisite is um, for for that revelation. So the prerequisite first is that falling away. That's a prerequisite for the man of sin being revealed, and then the man of sin being revealed is a prerequisite for the day of Christ. Anyway, let's keep going here. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. Understand that magic and miracles are very real. And in scriptures, we clearly see that Jesus and God can work miracles, but so can the evil powers under Satan. They can work miracles as well. And if you are a fellow truth seeker like me, and you've studied, cutting edge science, especially some of the stuff going on at CERN, quantum computing, AI, understand that the people doing some of this, I call it dark science, are deeply rooted in the occult. And it is a lot of what they're doing is pushing the boundaries not just of empirical science, but of sorcery, really, is what it is. And what's really interesting, C.S. Lewis wrote a fictional um, allegory of his view of what the end times would be like. And in that particular book, you had a scientific establishment ruling the world, and they'd really kind of like deceived everybody. But really, when you pull back the veil and start looking at their science, it's really Satanism. And C.S. Lewis wrote that a long time ago, but he has turned out to be spot on. And I need to reread that particular. It's his science fiction trilogy, C.S. Lewis's science fiction trilogy. Really interesting stuff. It's really a study of end times eschatology, but written in this allegorical science fiction style. Really fascinating work. I've read it only once, and it was incredibly disturbing to me the first time I read it. I keep meaning to go back and reread it because it's been several years now. But a great deal of foresight that man had. Anyway, let's carry on here. Power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them a strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. There are some people that just keep pushing back against truth, pushing back against truth, pushing back against truth. They're in denial whenever you try to tell them anything or show them anything or point them in the right direction. Eventually, people like that, God's going to give them this strong delusion. He's going to have enough. He's going to say, you've had your chances. I'm going to turn you over and let you be deceived by this son of perdition, this man of sin, and they're going to fall right into the trap. He's going to be the world leader, the hero, the Iron Man savior that everybody wants, and they're going to follow him to their eternal damnation. Really a terrible thing. All right, well, let's continue here. What's interesting about this, though, is that we see some prerequisites. So, first, let's talk about the rebuilding of the temple. And this is actually kind of interesting. So, Freemasonry, I was just digging into this recently for a Sunday school lesson. There's to become a Royal Arch Freemason, there's actually a couple different paths to it. There's Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and then there is the York Rite, and each of these have at a certain point, they have a ritual and a degree to become a Royal Arch Freemason. When you become a Royal Arch Freemason, so this is the point where you are given the name of the Freemason's god, which is Jabalun. So that comes from Jah or Yah, which is part of the biblical name of God. Okay, so far so good. Baal, the Canaanite Baal, um, to whom children were offered in sacrifice, and then On, being the sacred city of the Egyptian god Osiris. So the Freemasonic god is they've created this god it has aspects of the god of the Bible, Baal, this filthy Canaanite god, and Osiris. And Freemasonry is a religious system, absolutely, and it's not something that is compatible with Christianity at all. But at that point of becoming a Royal Arch Freemason, the and it's called the Royal Arch Freemason because the point and purpose of Freemasonry as a system is revealed to the Royal Archmason as well at that point, and that is to rebuild the Royal Arch, or in other words, the temple in Jerusalem. And there are actually many organizations that are working behind the scenes. You can look up the Abrahamic Accords, and various temple relics are being tracked down, those that still exist, and collected, and preparations are being made to rebuild a temple in Jerusalem. And there's a lot we could talk about. So the Dome of the Rock, which is on the so-called Temple Mount, that actually was never the site where the temple was. That was the site of the Fortress Antonia, a Roman encampment. The Muslims got it wrong when they built the Dome of the Rock there. The actual site of the temple is in the old city of David, and just like Jesus said, not one stone would be left to the temple on top of another. It was razed to the ground exactly as Jesus said, and only the foundation is left. But the foundation has animal pens and places where posts would have been set into it, or rings for hitching animals. There's blood channels carved into this foundation, the bedrock, basically the bedrock level. Um, so we do have evidence and, well, proof really, that this was the ancient temple site. It's not the Dome of the Rock. It's not the so-called Temple Mount. Um, and the Israeli authorities know where that is. And if they want to rebuild a temple on that site where Solomon's temple actually was, they could do it. They could do it anytime they want to. Now, I don't know that the site itself necessarily has to be reused either for the temple to be rebuilt. Maybe they'll build it somewhere entirely different in Jerusalem. I don't know. But the Dome of the Rock does not have to be destroyed in order to rebuild the temple. That is a misconception. Um, keep getting off on these rabbit trails today. I'm trying to keep this video short, but I think we're just going to fail miserably at that. Anyway, temple relics. Yeah, we could talk about how some temple relics have actually been discovered. And I do believe that the location of the Ark of the Covenant is known. Um, and possibly some other things that were with it as well. But I'm not going to get on that rabbit trail either. Let me just say this, though. A lot of Christians are excited about the rebuilding of the temple, and they don't really. Like growing up, I never really heard much as to whether the rebuilding of the temple was going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Let me put it this way: the rebuilding of the temple is absolutely a bad thing. It's a terrible thing. But a lot of Bible believing Christians are excited to see prophecy fulfilled because the rebuilding of the temple has to happen before Jesus eventually returns. So, in other words, let me kind of bring us this back into focus here. So, the day of Christ isn't going to come until the man of sin, the Antichrist, is revealed. And the Antichrist is going to be revealed to the world when he commits this abomination of desolation. Now, at this point that he does this, he most likely will have been in power for a while. A lot of people think, and I believe this is the case myself, that during the tribulation period, a greater 7 year period, at the middle of that is where the Antichrist ascends in the temple and then claims to be God and sets himself up as the God figure in a new religion, a new one world religion. Now, at this point in time, though, he's already reigned for the first 3.5 years of that 7 year period. Then at that point, the Antichrist beast religious system begins actively persecuting and hunting down Christians and Jews and slaughtering them. And we'll talk about this in a little more detail from Daniel 12 in just a moment here. But understand that then this just means, in context, we have several prerequisites. The building of the temple is a prerequisite before the rapture, and the man of sin being unveiled is a prerequisite. And those things obviously have not happened yet. Now, the temple could be rebuilt any day. That's something that could happen very quickly. And I personally also believe that the United States of America will be destroyed as a nation during the lead up before we even get into that 7 year tribulation period. Because well, eventually we're heading towards this one world beast system. It's going to be a one world government. So either America becomes that or America gets destroyed and is supplanted by that. Those are your logical conclusions if you hold to Bible prophecy. There's no other really way to slice and dice that. And as I said, America is in dire straits right now. Arguably, America's already gone as we know it. You don't subvert an election and have a nation come out of that intact. Well, let's not get on that rabbit trail either. I have other videos about that, or we could talk about that at a later time if anyone is interested. But the temple, I was going to say, temple artifacts, some of those are known. Some of them are. Okay, anyway. So, again, apologize. Very tired. I did write myself some notes here, but I'm about to fall asleep here. Let's go over to Daniel 12 and read this for a little more context, and then we'll wrap this up before I get too incoherent to be tolerated anymore. But my point here is I think there's a great many things left on God's calendar of events before we get into this stuff. I personally think that the fall of the United States is going to happen within the next 2 years unless God grants us a miraculous reprieve. And he might not. Then we have the rebuilding of the temple. Oh yes, the Abrahamic Accords. There is an effort to reunite the so-called Abrahamic religions, Christianity, um, as represented by Catholicism, Islam, and Judaism. And understand that all three of those are false religions. Catholicism is not Bible believing Christianity. Islam is not a true continuation of Judaism and Christianity. And Judaism, let's make this very clear. When Christ came, he fulfilled the law. But the Jews 2,000 years ago, they rejected him. 2,000 years of rejecting Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior, the one true God of heaven, has not made religious Judaism into a more pure and holy religious system. There are some abominations that have crept into that. It is a satanic religious system now. Now, that being said, there are still some Jewish people who try to keep the Torah. But once you start getting into the Talmud, which is the writings of rabbis, it's traditions of men, it is extremely corrupt and satanic filth. And then once you get into Kabbalah, which is also practiced within some Jewish circles, and it's basically Satanism that goes back to Egypt and Babylon. Um, that's all I'm going to say about that right now. But understand that those who are going to be rebuilding the temple are going to be doing it for the purpose of creating this one world religious system. They are not going to be the good guys. And the rebuilding the temple is not directly an event that Christians should celebrate. There's going to be this spirit of, oh, yay, brotherhood of man, everyone's united, peace, love. And we all worship the same God, don't we? Just under different names? No, we don't. No, we do not. There are different Jesuses. And make sure you're worshiping the right one. Anyway, that religious system. So that's not really going to be a good thing. I never had that clarified for me, growing up in churches and stuff. I have people who are excited about preparations for the rebuilding of the temple, which have been going on for decades. And really, they could move ahead with that very quickly if they wanted to. Um, but ultimately, that just means the beginning of some very rough times for God's people. Something to keep in mind. Let's go to Daniel 12. Daniel chapter 12, end of the chapter, very end of the book of Daniel. So, and I heard, this being Daniel, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? So Daniel's just received a lot of interesting prophecy. There's passages in Daniel that talk about, now understand this is long before Christ. They talk about the four empires that would come on the scene before Jesus Christ came and lived as a man. That Jesus would come during the time of Rome's rule. And then Daniel talks about other things like the last four nations that will exist before Jesus returns a second time as the conquering king. And I do believe that the first of those beast nations, the winged lion whose wings are removed from it, I do think that's the United States, or you could argue, Western Anglo civilization. Anyway, but let's keep reading here. Anyway, um, so Daniel had a lot of stuff thrown at him, and he didn't really understand all of it. And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the end, till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,335 days. But go thou thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So, what are we talking about? Well, elsewhere, the 7 year period, the 7 year tribulation period is laid out, and really you could say that there's the Great Tribulation, which is the latter 3.5 years approximately, where God's judgment is dished out on an unrepentant humanity, and then there's the first part of it, which if my understanding of things from my studies is correct, like I said, I believe we have the horsemen leading up to the 7 years, and we're in that period of the horsemen right now. I do think we're going to see world conflict and mass death. Half of the world population will be dead before we even get to the tribulation, that 7 year period. But then that tribulation period, really, it's the latter 3.5 years that's the Great Tribulation. Um, God's judgment on earth, and that's going to be absolutely horrible. Christians won't be around for that. The rapture will have happened by then. But Christians will be around for the first half of the tribulation, and obviously through the horsemen of the apocalypse period, which is the lead up to the tribulation. Those are going to be some rough times. So if you think that you're just going to sit all comfortable and cozy and God's going to beam you up before any suffering or hardship occur in your life, it's probably not going to work out that way. Sorry, hate to break it to you. The days here are very interesting. So 1,290 days is about 3.5 years. I double checked myself, but if I made any mistakes here, go easy on me. Like I said, it's been a long day. But it's not exactly 3.5 years, but it's approximately. So this is the middle of that 7 year tribulation period, and this is when, well, it says it right here, and the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away. Now understand, we don't have daily sacrifices in a rebuilt temple right now. We don't. So the temple will be rebuilt. They will reinstitute the daily sacrifices. This is probably the reinstituting of the daily sacrifices and the rebuilding of the temple. That's probably going to happen at the beginning of the 7 year period, I would think. And this one world religious system will be, created. But then at the midway point of the tribulation, 3.5 years later, the daily sacrifice. No, that's daily sacrifice shall be taken away. Nope, I misread that. Sorry. So it seems like during that first 3.5 years of the tribulation, the sacrifices are gone. They're not there. So prior to that, I guess, would be the rebuilding of the temple system and the reinstitution of the daily sacrifices. And understand that religious Jews, that's what they're working towards right now. They do think that they need to reinstitute that system. All right, so sacrifice is taken away, and then there's 1,290 days, and then there's the abomination of desolation. The words are both there. Um, and what is the abomination and what is the desolation? Well, the abomination is the Antichrist going to the temple, claiming to be God. The desolation, what is that? Well, I've heard Bible scholars say, and I think this is probably what's going on here, is that at this point, Satan actually directly is able to take control of that Antichrist person, who prior to this point may have been just an Illuminati type figure, a Luciferian doing Satan's bidding and very much in touch with the occult, with the spiritual realm and with satanic forces through occult means. But at the point that this happens, Satan actually takes possession of him as a vessel. Very possible. And there's a whole lot that goes into that whole side of things. I have read and heard so many interesting threads on all of this. I've read that they are genetically engineering an entity to be, well, the beast. Now, understand there's a satanic trinity. There's the beast, the false prophet, and the antichrist, is my understanding of it, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. And you know what those entities are all each going to be is there's a lot. And I don't know that I've really personally come to any conclusive epiphanies about all that, so I'm not going to talk too much further about that. Anyway, the abomination of desolation, and Jesus did say, when you see this, flee and get out of the area, because this is the point that active warfare against God's people and massacring of Christians and Jews, that's at this 1,290 day mark. But blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30. And so this, I believe, is actually when the saints are caught up or raptured, and then we have the remaining 3.5 years of God judging those who are left. Um, and then, the final reckoning of things after that. Now, I may be incorrect about some of this, but the main takeaway I think that you should consider from this video is that there are prerequisites to that day of Christ that is coming. And there are many difficulties and hardships between here and there. So don't think that God's going to give you a quick and easy ride with no suffering. The wise man sees evil afar off and takes means to avoid it, the scriptures tell us. So plan ahead. Understand that there are rough times ahead. If you've just been living easy these last years and thinking it's always going to be that way, it's not. So get ready. All right, well, thank you for your attention. I hope this video has been interesting to you, maybe opened up some avenues of exploration for you. And feel free to leave comments and or reach out to me. And you guys have a good weekend and Happy New Year.